Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, 30a of Maseches Taanis, and we're at the two dots about 8 lines down the page. 9 lines down the page. So the Gemara quotes the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that on Erev Tisha B'Av, on the eve of Tisha B'Av, the day before Tisha B'Av, Lo Yochal Adam Shnei Tavshilin. A person shouldn't eat 2 cooked items. Rashi there says it means like meat and fish, or meat and eggs, at the same meal, or fish and egg. And then it says Lo yochal basar v'lo yishteh yain. He shouldn't eat any meat and he shouldn't drink any wine. That's actually why on the Rashi there's a question when he said meat, if that's a correct girsa, because you anyways can't eat any meat. And then it says, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, Yeshane, a person should do differently than what they normally do. The Gemara will elaborate on what that means. So the Gemara says as follows, Amar, it quotes that part of the Mishnah, and then it says, Amar Rav Yehuda said, Lo shanu ela mishesho sulamala. That which we say that you shouldn't eat a meal that involves 2 cooked foods, that's from 6 hours into the day and on. Basically from, I guess, midday and onwards, after 6 hours. Aval mishesho sulamata, but before 6 hours have elapsed in the daytime, it's still the morning, and then it's mutter, it's permitted for one to, on Erev Tisha B'Av, on the eve of Tisha B'Av, to eat a meal like this, to eat 2 cooked foods. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda said furthermore, Lo shanu ela besuda hamafsik ba. This was only taught with regards to the su'udas hamafsekes, the suda that interrupts, the last suda, the last meal that one eats before the start of the fast. Aval besuda she'eno mafsik ba, but if it's not the sudas hamafsekes, it's not the suda, the meal that interrupts, that is eaten right before the fast, mutter, then it's permitted for one to eat 2 cooked meals. So he said 2 statements. He said, first of all, that prohibition against eating 2 cooked meals only applies after midday, after 6 hours into the day. And not only that, but it also only applies to the last meal before Tisha B'Av. Before Tisha B'Av starts, the Sudas HaMafsekes. V'tarvayu l'kula, and both of them were said as a leniency. Utzricha, right, he's coming to be more lenient on the simple reading of the Mishnah. The Mishnah just said that Erev Tisha B'Av, you can't eat 2 cooked foods. So he's qualifying that and saying, first of all, it's only after 6 hours, and second of all, it's only the last meal. Utzricha, he needed to tell me both ideas though. If he only taught me that it only applies to your final meal, to your sudas hamafsekes, I would have thought that it's true even if that sudas hamafsekes is before 6 hours, even if it's in the morning. I would let's say a person has their last meal before Tisha B'Av, they kind of start their fast early at 11 o'clock a.m. on Erev Tisha B'Av, that's their last meal. You might have thought that they're not allowed to eat 2 cooked foods. Kamash Malan, that's why he came and told me that Misheshos Ulamala, that it's only true from 6 hours and on. It's only true in the afternoon. V'iyash Ma'inon Misheshos Ulamala, and if he had only taught me that it applies only from 6 hours and on, but he hadn't told me that it only applies to the last meal, Havamina Fil Besuda She'eno Mafsik Ba, I would have thought that it's true even for a Suda that's not the Suda Samsek, it's not the last Suda, not the last meal. So if I had late lunch on Erev Tisha B'Av, 2 o'clock, but I'm still having another meal later at 6 o'clock, I might have thought that even at 2 o'clock, since it's after 6 hours, I can't eat 2 cooked foods. Kamash Malan, that's why he came and taught me Besuda HaMafsik Ba, it's specifically the Suda Samafsekes, that last meal. So and even though the Mishnah said that you're not allowed to eat 2 cooked foods on Erev Tisha B'Av, Rabbi Yehuda came and told us that it's specifically in the afternoon, and it's specifically the last meal, the Sudas HaMafsekes. That's where we are restricted, and indeed, right, we customarily eat like one egg and a piece of bread or something, but not too nice cooked foods. We'll see a little bit more about that Sudas HaMafsekes later at the bottom of the page. So the Gemara continues, and it says, Tanya Kalishna Kama, Tanya Kalishna Basra. We have a brisa backing up the first language, the first thing that Rabbi Yehuda said, which was that it's specifically, the restriction is specifically after 6 hours. And Tanya Kalishna Basra, we have a brisa backing up his second lashon, the second language, the second statement he made, that it's specifically the Sudas HaMafsekes. Tanya Kalishna Basra, we start with quoting the brisa that's backing up his second lashon, his second idea, like it's specifically the Sudas HaMafsekes. The brisa says, Hasoed Erev Tisha B'Av, if somebody has a meal on the eve of Tisha B'Av, the day before Tisha B'Av, Im Asid Lisod Suda Acheres, if he intends in the future, later that day, to eat another Suda, another meal, Mutter Lechol Basar V'Lishtos Yayin, he's allowed to eat meat and to drink wine. Now we have a custom not to do any of that for the whole 9 days, but again, Dina de Gemara, or the Dina of the Mishnah is that it's specifically on Erev Tisha B'Av, and actually we're qualifying it and saying it's specifically the last meal. So this brisa is saying that if you're having a meal on Erev Tisha B'Av, if you are planning to have another meal later, then you're allowed to still eat meat and drink wine. But if not, if this is your last meal, asur lechol basar b'lishtos yayin, it's forbidden to eat meat and drink wine. So we see from this brisa, this idea that it's specifically the last meal where these prohibitions apply. And Tanya Kalishna Kama, we have a brisa like the Lishna Kama, like the first language, the first statement of Rabbi Yehuda, that it's specifically from 6 hours and on. The brisa says, Erev Tisha B'Av v'lo yochal adam shnei tavshilin. On the eve of Tisha B'Av, a person shouldn't eat 2 cooked foods. V'lo yochal basar v'lo yishta yayin, and you shouldn't eat meat and you shouldn't drink wine. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer yishaneh. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you should just do differently than what you normally do. So that's so far like it said in the Mishnah. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda said about this, Ketzad Meshane, how do you adjust? What is it that you do differently? How does that play out? So as follows, Im haya ragil le'echol shnei tavshilin, if you normally eat meals that have 2 cooked foods, yochal min echad, then you should only eat 1. Im haya ragil lisod basar b'nei adam, and if you normally eat with 10 people, so you should eat with just 5. We're going to see again that we eat with just by ourselves, but he's, according to Shimon Gamliel at least, that you're just mishana, you just do differently than what you normally do. So if you normally have 10, you should do 5. Hayaragil lishtos asara kosos, if you usually drink 10 cups of wine, shose chamisha kosos, you should only drink 5. So this is the explanation for the opinion that says yishana, do differently, just do less than what you normally do. And that's basically what he's saying. If you normally eat 2 cooked foods, eat just 1. That's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, as explained by Rabbi Yehuda. Now the brisa continues and it says, Bamed dvarim amurim, when are these words said? Mishesha u'sulamala. That's all true from 6 hours and on. About Mishesha u'sulamata, mutter, but from 6 hours and before 6 hours into the day, then it's permitted. Seems to be going back on both opinions. It's permitted according to the first opinion who said that you can't eat 2 cooked foods and you can't eat meat and wine and drink wine. That's only, now we're saying Bamed dvarim amurim, when is that said? Only after 6 hours, but before 6 hours, it's permitted. And the same thing Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who's saying you should do differently than what you normally do, that's only after 6 hours and not before. So this brisa states explicitly that, like the Lishna Kama, like the first thing Rabbi Yehuda said, that these halachos, these restrictions, only apply after 6 hours into the day on Erev Tisha B'Av. Tanya Idach, we have a brisa that says, another brisa, Erev Tisha B'Av, lo yochal adam shnei tavshilin. It says again, on Erev Tisha B'Av, on the eve of Tisha B'Av, a man shouldn't eat 2 cooked foods. Lo yochal basar v'lo yishta yayin. He shouldn't eat meat and drink wine. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim omrim yishanen. The Chachamim say that you should just do differently. So they are channeling the opinion of Reb Shimon Gamliel, or he's channeling the opinion of the Chacham, of the other sages, according to this brisa. Umemayit v'basar v'yayin, and one should have less meat and less wine. Ketzad memayit, how is it that you have less? How does that play out? So it gives a little bit of a different explanation. I think it amounts to the same thing, but it gives just different descriptions. Im haya ragil lechol litra basar. If a person normally ate a litra, it's a measurement, I guess, like a liter of meat. Liter is usually a liquid measurement, I think, but perhaps, I'm sure in some society it could be otherwise. So if you have a litra basar, if you have a litra of meat, normally yochal chatzi litra, then Erev Tisha B'Av you should have half a litra. Hayarabi lishtos log yain, if you normally drink a log, that's also a measurement, a lug, or a log of wine. Yishte chatzi lug, you should drink half a lug instead. Chatzi lug yain. Bim eino ragil kol ikar, and says the brisa, if you normally don't have any, so then asr, then it's forbidden to have any, because you shouldn't be doing more than what you normally do. You shouldn't all of a sudden be having meat or wine on Erev Tisha B'Av. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Im haya ragil lechot snon o meliach achar sudaso harashus biyado. If somebody normally eats radish or some salted foods after their meal, so they're allowed to still do so. Salted, Rashi says, salted fish or salted meat. Since it doesn't have so much taste, so then it would be permitted. And yeah, so Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying that, I guess, even though normally you have to do a little bit differently than what you do, but you can still have your dessert of your radish or salted meat or fish, even though it's Erev Tisha B'Av. Tanya Idach, we have another brisa. The brisa says, Kol shehu mishum Tisha B'Av, asar lechol basar, ve'asar lishtos yayin, ve'asar lirchotz. Any time that it's mishum Tisha B'Av, that it's for that the purpose of the meal is in preparation for Tisha B'Av, like specifically Rashi says the Sudas HaMafsekes, this meal of interruption, this last meal. So then it's forbidden to eat meat, it's forbidden to drink wine, and it's forbidden to wash your hands normally. We know on Tisha B'Av you're not allowed to wash your hands. It's one of the restrictions, or to wash in general, to wash your body. And hands are included, we wash only to our knuckles. So this brisa is saying that already at the Sudas HaMafsekes, it's Mishum Tisha B'Av, it's for the purpose of Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to wash your hands. But Kol She'eino Mishum Tisha B'Av, if it's not for Tisha B'Av, meaning it's, let's say, the last meal before a different fast, or it's it's Erev Tisha B'Av, but it's an earlier meal, it's not the Sudas HaMafsekes, Mutter Lechol Basar V'Lishtos Yayin, one is permitted to eat meat and to drink wine, and here our Gemara says the asar lirchotz. Other versions actually have mutter lirchotz. It's forbidden it's still forbidden to wash, or it could be the other versions are saying it's permitted to wash your hands. That's definitely in context. It sounds like it's saying that. So let's go with that here. So it's mutter lirchotz. You're allowed to wash your hands because it's not for the purpose of Tisha B'Av. Really, you have to really say that because, at least according to Rashi, says this could be talking about not even Erev Tisha B'Av or an earlier meal on Erev Tisha B'Av. So certainly everybody will agree you're allowed to wash your hands. So that's if it's not Mishum Tisha B'Av. If it's not for the purpose of Tisha B'Av, you're allowed to eat meat and drink wine and wash. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Omer Mishum Aviv. Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi, said in the name of his father, Rabbi Yossi, Kol shah shemutter lechol basar, mutter lirchotz. Any time that it's permitted to eat meat, it's permitted to wash. So again, depending on your girsa of the previous line, he's either coming to argue. The previous opinion maybe was saying you're allowed to eat meat, but you're not allowed to wash your hands. And he's saying, no, anytime you're allowed to eat meat, you're allowed to wash your hands. Or it could be that he's just explaining and giving the rule. He's saying, the previous opinion was you're allowed to eat meat and wash your hands, and he's saying because anytime you're allowed to eat meat, you're allowed to wash your hands. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kol mitzvos hanoagos ba'avel noagos b'Tisha B'Av. All of the mitzvos, all of the commandments that apply to a mourner apply to everyone on Tisha B'Av on the 9th of Av. Asar b'achilo v'shtiyah, it's forbidden to eat and drink. Now that a mourner is allowed to eat and drink, but he's just listing off all the things that are forbidden on Tisha B'Av, and now we get to the things that are forbidden for a mourner. Uvesicha, sicha is rubbing lotions or oils on oneself. Uveni'ilas hasandal, and wearing proper shoes, leather shoes. Uvetash mishamita, and marital relations are also forbidden on Tisha B'Av and to an avel, to someone who's a mourner during Shiva. The Asr Likros Batorah, and now other restrictions actually apply to both an avel and to a mourner, they apply to a mourner and to someone on Tisha B'Av. You're not allowed to learn Torah. That's Asr Likros Batorah. You can't read from the Chumash, B'Neviim, from the Navi, from the prophets of Iksubim and the writings, U'Lishanos B'Mishnah, and you can't learn Mishnah, B'Talmud, you can't learn Gemara, U'Medrash, you can't learn Medrash, V'Halachos, you can't learn Halacha, Jewish law, U'V'Agados, you can't learn the moral and ethical teachings of the Gemara and the Medrash, stories, etc. Agada, Avakorehu B'Makom She'eno Ragel Likros. However, according to this opinion of the Brisa, you're allowed to read from something in Tanakh if you're not accustomed to reading it, because then it's a struggle. V'shoneh b'makom she'eino ragil lishnos, and you can learn Mishnah or Gemara if it's not something that you're accustomed to learning, because then it's a struggle, it's not an enjoyment. V'koreh, and also, the reason for all this, the reason why you're not allowed to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av, the Gemara is going to quote it, is the pasuk we learned from Tehillim, that says that Pikudei Hashem Yisharim Misamchei Lev, the teachings of Hashem are straight and they bring joy to the heart. And therefore, on a day of sadness, we're not allowed to bring joy to our hearts by learning Torah. However, it says that you are allowed to read certain things. B'Kara B'Kinos, you're allowed to read the Kinos, the Lamentations. B'Iyov, you're allowed to read the story of Iyov, of Job, because it's a sad story. B'Dvarim HaRoim Sheb'Yirmiyah, you could read the chapters that describe bad things in the book of Yirmiyah, of Jeremiah. V'tinoko shel beis rabban b'teilin, and the schools are closed, they're idle. Mishum shenemar, because the pasuk says the learning of young children is cancelled, because it says in the verse, Pikudei Hashem Yisharim Misamchei Lev, the teachings, the commandments of Hashem are straight, and they bring joy to the heart. Rabbi Yehuda says, Af einu kar b'makom she'eino ragel likros. No, you can't even read from Tanakh, from things that you're not accustomed to. Ve'eino shana b'makom she'eino ragel lishnos, and you're not allowed to learn Gemara and Mishnah, even things that you're not accustomed to learning. Aval karehu be'Iyov uvekinos uvedvarim harayim, but you are allowed to read from Iyov and the Kinos, the Lamentations of Dvarim Harayim, and bad things, Shebi Yirmiyahu, in the book of Yirmiyah, V'tinoko shel beis rabban b'teilin bo, and again he agrees that the schools are closed, Mishum shenemar, because the pasuk says, the verse says, Pikudei Hashem Yisharim Misamchei Lev, the mitzvahs, the commandments of Hashem are straight, and they bring joy to the heart. And therefore, we don't study Torah on Tisha B'Av except for Dvarim HaRaim, except for bad things and sad stories, and we can learn about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and things like that. Okay, now the Mishnah had said, Lo yochal basar v'lo yishta yain, one shouldn't eat meat or drink wine. Tana, it was taught, aval ochelu basar maliach, he's allowed to eat salted meat, v'shose yayin migato, and he's allowed to drink wine from the vat, meaning it hasn't been able to ferment properly yet. I guess it doesn't yet, it's not yet alcoholic, and therefore you're allowed to drink it even, strictly speaking, even on Erev Tisha B'Av. Basar Moliach ad kama, how many days does it need to be salted for that it's now considered salty meat and you're allowed to eat it? Amr Rav Chanina bar Kahana Mishmei de Shmuel. Rav Chanina bar Kahana saying the name of Shmuel calls man. There's again a question of how you read this, but calls man that it's kishlamim. We're going to read it. That anytime it's like a shlamim, the shlamim offering is supposed to be eaten within, at least midaraisa, according to the Torah. You have 2 days and 1 night. So if you bring the shlamim today, that carbon peace offering, you can eat it that day, that night, and the next day, and then that's the amount of time you have to eat it. So the Gemara says that if you're salting meat for that amount of time, so before that it's still considered good, and you would not be allowed to eat it on Erev Tisha B'Av. But once it's been salted for that amount of time, so I guess about 2 days or more, so then at that point it's not really, it loses much of its taste, it's not real good meat, and therefore you're allowed to eat it on Erev Tisha B'Av. And we learn that from the Shlamim because after this 2 day period, the Shlamim was considered nosar, was leftovers, you couldn't eat it, and the Gemara, according to Rashi at least, is understanding that at that point it lost some of its status as meat. If it's real good taste, that's why you're no longer allowed to consume it for the carbon. You have to consume it before that while it's still good, because after that it starts to lose its taste. And so the same is true for here, that we say that once it starts to lose its taste, it's been salted for 2 days or more, so then you would be allowed to eat it on Erev Tisha B'Av because it's not really good meat anymore. The yayin migato ad kama. And what about wine from the vat? How long can it be sitting in the vat and fermenting and you're still allowed to drink it? It's not yet considered real wine. Kozman shehu toses. So as long as it's still boiling, still fermenting, you're allowed to drink it. Tana was taught yayin toses ein bo mishum giloi. Normally, if you leave a barrel of wine open overnight, we're not allowed to drink it because we're concerned that a snake maybe came and started to sip from it and left its venom in the wine. So for safety precautions, we don't drink from wine that was left open overnight. So the Gemara is saying, though, that if it's still toses, if it's still fermenting and boiling, so then it's okay, because we're not concerned that a snake would come and drink it. You would run away from its boilingness, its resicha, its boiling. V'kama tesisa. So how long does it ferment for? Gimel yamim, 3 days. So if the wine is still, the grapes are still in the vat, and it's the first 3 days, then you're allowed to drink it, strictly speaking, even right before Tisha B'Av. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda sang in the name of Rav. Kachaya minhago shel Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Eli. The following was the custom of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Eli. Erev Tisha B'Av, on the eve of Tisha B'Av, mevi'in lo pascha reiva b'melach. They would bring him stale bread dipped in salt. That's all he would eat, was the stale bread with salt. V'yoshev bein taner l'kirayim. And he would sit in his kitchen on the floor between the oven and the stove. And v'ochel, and eat v'shosal kiton shalmayim, and he would drink water. V'domek mishameso mutal lefanim, and he was comparable to a person whose dead was still in front of them. They were waiting to bury their dead. He was in such a the way he conducted himself in such a state of mourning on Erev Tisha B'Av, it was like he had a dead family member in the family. And how did he conduct himself? He would sit on the floor of the kitchen. It's not a respectable place in between the oven and the stove, probably full of soot and who knows what. And he would sit there and just eat stale bread and drink water, and that's it. And that's how he would mourn already on Erev Tisha B'Av. And that's similar to what we do for the Sudas HaMafsekes, for that last meal, where we sit on the floor, we sit by ourselves, and we eat usually just a little bit of bread and some egg, and we even sprinkle a little bit of ashes on that egg. Okay, we'll pick up here. We have just 1.5 more amudim to go. Next week we'll learn Lamed Amud Beis, 30b, And then the following week we'll learn just this half Amud, this half page, Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, 31a, and we'll also celebrate with a Siyum, God willing.